Now, you've heard me say healing happens in community. And I think that is in largely because that whatever relationship that you are prioritizing in the moment, it is going to hold a mirror up to ourselves and show us our insecurities, our inadequacies, our deficiencies, our communication issues. It's going to expose ourselves, whether in friendship, romantic, platonic, family, co-workers, whatever you decide to prioritize in your life, all it is going to hold a mirror up to yourself. And I think that is why, one, healing happens in community, but also as people have decided to focus their friendships and things like that, you're starting to see more conversations about friendship fallouts just as much as you're hearing about romantic fallouts. And that's just because people don't want to do the inner work. Hello, my healing fam. Welcome to Healing Not Healed, where we will talk about all things mental health and holistic wellness in a very transparent and culturally competent space. So the truth is, healing does happen in a community. And why is that the case in the first place? It's because, like I said, relationships hold a mirror up to us. And as we've leaned into a society that has prioritized family relationships, creating communities out of bonds and relationships that we formed maybe in school, shared interests, hobbies, things like that in our community, and have leaned away from traditional family values, you're still going to see some of that conflict rise up, right? And I've experienced that myself. We've talked about that this year on a lot of people just falling out of relationships and not really dealing with conflict in a very productive way. I've talked about burnout being one of those reasons why our emotional regulation just doesn't allow us to tolerate a lot of the same things that we probably did before with people, where we have more we have more patience for things before that we probably don't have as much patience for. And a lot of that is, I don't think people recognize how much, no matter what relationship that you prioritize, whether romantic, friendship, family, it's going to hold up a mirror to what is going on within yourself that you have not addressed. And whether you decide to shift your attention to friends, whether you decide to shift your attention to relationships, it's going to expose those concerns and those issues. And so when I say healing happens in community, I think people these days, you see a lot of congregation of groups in a very superficial way. Again, meetups, hangouts, people go, they do their thing, and then they go back into their spaces. Some thrive in those environments and create meaningful connections, and I have made some great meaningful connections in those ways. But some people walk away from those situations still feeling empty, still feeling lonely, still not making any friends because they haven't connected with anyone. And I think that takes, again, a level of vulnerability that some people are not willing to do the work to do. And it's the moment that they've come with confrontation or difference of opinions, and we're not talking political because I'm not even going down that route, but when they're confronted with maybe values that are being confronted, some people put up a shield and hide. They don't want to do with constructive feedback. They don't want to do constructive criticism. They don't want to take a look at themselves. They don't want to take accountability. And instead of facing that shame, they shut down and they recluse. And I think that fear has driven a lot of people in themselves, where they're struggling to create those connections because they're fearful of being seen for who they really are. And again, it's hard to create connection when you're hiding in plain sight. Now, I come from a family of women that are or have been historically male-centered, and I've had these conversations with my mom. We've done a lot of healing this year. We've had a lot of deep conversations, but a lot of what I had to unlearn was codependency. And it started out codependency in relationships and focusing primarily on relationships outside of my ambition, because me being a hustler, working, that has always been my number one, and any relationship can tell you that. I will never, I have never put anybody before my work. But as far as everything else, I have put romantic relationships first. And that created a sense of codependency where I neglected a lot of people in my life while prioritizing a relationship. And I've been on the other end of that. I've seen people prioritize their relationships and I felt neglected, right? And so I don't have shame for the people that experience that, because I understand how that's created. I've lived it, but I also understand the damage that it does and why I've distanced myself from it. And what healing had to take place for myself to recognize that when people are coming from that point of view, it's not for me to teach them that lesson. It's not for me to impose that lesson. And so I have to distance myself, because that being said, if you're willing to neglect yourself for someone, you're willing to neglect me as a friend, because you should always value yourself first. And it took me a long time to recognize that people weren't valuing themselves first to even recognize how to be a good friend to someone else. And again, back to healing happens in community. Me unlearning codependency, me unlearning how to communicate, me unlearning being vulnerable with women. I had to learn all of that myself to develop healthy relationships with women, because watching my mom, I never really seen her have a lot of healthy relationships with women that weren't centered around the men that they were dating. I wasn't familiar with girls' nights. I wasn't familiar with girl talk, girl code, all these things that I kind of learned in my 20s and 30s. I would say a majority of it I learned in my 30s, because like I said, I was so centered on a relationship. I didn't necessarily understand what it was like of womanhood and being connected to women more intimately outside of just hanging out, drinking, partying, and just talking about our relationships. And in the last 5 years, when I haven't prioritized romantic relationships and I've prioritized my friendships, I recognized that there was still work to be done. There was still insecurities. There were still communication issues. There was still conflict. There was still confrontation. So just because you're not focusing in a romantic sense doesn't mean you don't have interpersonal skills that you need to work on and develop. So I hear these TikToks where women say, well, I'll let my friend vent about the same thing 100 times. If they want to talk about that man 100 times, I get that. I get being a good friend. But at what point do you hold your friends accountable? At what point do you want growth with your friends? At what point do you want to see them happy and doing well? I don't want to see you suffering. I don't want to hear you coming back in sadness and grief. I want to see you thrive. And so I had to recognize enabling behavior as well. I'm not doing you any good as well as myself. Again, I think there's this assumption that friendships are low maintenance and that it doesn't require as much emotional labor. And it does, because these are people that, no offense, married or not, are probably going to be long-standing relationships in your life that, if you value and nurture them correctly, will be there, regardless of if their relationship works out or not. And so I have had friends 20, 30 plus years. I just saw my friend, we grew up in a sandbox together since 5 years old. My mom used to babysit. Yes, there's not this high expectations of I need you to be at every waking moment, but I know that if I call you, I can depend on you. If I need something, I know you'll be there. And there was emotional labor and community, showing up even when you're tired, showing up even when you don't want to go, doing the drives, checking in with each other, being a support to each other financially, mentally, emotionally. All those things are expectations in a relationship, whether or not they're romantic. And I think friends need to understand what it really means to be a friend. It's not convenient. It's not an afterthought. It's not performative. And it really should be with people who are really sure of themselves. Now, a lot of us have our own insecurities and own personal issues and concerns, personal traumas. But I have also recognized that man, woman, no matter your gender, you have to be around people that are self-assured and don't project their own insecurities onto you, that can come to you and let you know what their vulnerabilities are. So it's not like they are projecting when they recognize something like, hey girl, this is a me issue, not a you issue. People that can take that accountability. Not everybody can do that. And again, that doesn't make them a bad person, but I think vulnerability and shame is such a complex issue that people hide behind, that it makes it much more complicated to create real meaningful connection, because you really can't be true to yourself. So when I say healing happens in community, when you've had people that have been dishonest, who have been manipulative, who have been gaslighting you and all these other things, and you meet people that value you, that encourage you, that reassure you, that validate you, who understand you, you rewire and you unlearn and relearn new behaviors. You learn new communication styles. Your nervous system feels more calm and centered, and you can navigate relationships a little bit more sure of yourself. Because yes, when people do those types of things to you, it can make you doubt yourself. It can make you create mistrust, where you do create these dynamics in relationships because you don't know what's right and wrong. But I will say, when you are truly and genuinely doing the work, like take the time to slow down, evaluate your relationships, really look into them. What are reciprocal? How do people deal with conflict? How do you deal with your own emotions? How does your regulatory system feel around certain people? Do certain people make you just feel completely uncomfortable? And why is that? Again, people are a mirror. What you decide to stand around is your own choice. But just know that you are not going to go unscathed without doing some sense of self-reflection and self-evaluation. Partying, drinking, having fun, doing all those things are great, but it's not going to help you build connection. You can't do the emotional bypassing and the emotional labor of connecting with people. You can't bypass the hard stuff and then wonder why there's no connection, why there's no real intimacy in your friendships. You can't bypass the labor of doing the difficult things, having the difficult conversations, showing up when you don't feel like it, supporting even when it makes no sense, and encouraging and reassuring. If you want that type of love, you have to give it too. And if you are feeling shame in giving yourself that kind of love, again, that goes back to what is going on with you, that you can be so self-assured and validated and confident that you can love another person in that same way. And so I've noticed the difference. I have created some really great relationships this year. We've had conflicts. I've had to assert my boundaries in certain situations and say, no, I don't feel comfortable doing that. No, I don't want to do that. And it has been met with so much respect and love and grace. And I feel like I said, healing happens in community. I have felt more confident in my discernment when it comes to formulating relationships, especially with my homegirls. And so I truly appreciate them. I appreciate the healing that has taken place because of the women that have been in my life. And I am extremely grateful. And I continue to just hope that I continue to grow and evolve into a better woman so that I can be a better friend, a better person, a better lover, a better daughter, etc., 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 all the identities. But I know that that takes place with being confronted with myself, being in community, and being in relationships that challenge me. And so don't walk away from those challenges. When you feel something come up for you, really evaluate what is being said, what is being communicated. What am I supposed to learn from this? And embrace the journey. Because I love people. I love people. I have a love-hate relationship with people, but I love people because I learn a lot about myself. And so I'm grateful for that. All right, Healing Fam. Make sure you get out in community. Be a good friend. Love on somebody today. And make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.